Hello class, hope y'all are doing well. Here in Boston, it's freezing cold, and yeah, I wish I was, as I always say, I always wish I was in class with you guys. Today, well, hopefully this whole week you've been practicing for your tri-term, you understand. But for today, we're going to move on to the next section, still talking about evolution, but different elements of evolution that both pretty interesting and both very necessary for the AP exam. So this one's called the origin of species. I didn't break this down by standards, so I wanted to do like a very quick, very short video so you guys can more understand it more fully and not be confused. You know that you guys have a lot of homework. I know it's a 3-day weekend. I wouldn't say it's a lot of homework, but there's going to be a vocab quiz on Tuesday. I also asked you guys to do a couple things, so make sure that you look on Schoology to get all the information that you need for homework. Also, Nadine emailed me asking about the kid blog thing. If it wasn't very clear, on Schoology, what I want you to do is I want everybody to turn in their own blog about science news. So we're going to do essentially 2 different blogs. One blog is going to be about your quick science project, which you guys are splitting up Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And the other one we're going to do weekly, your own, but something about science news. So if you guys are a little bit confused, you guys are doing 2 blog sites, both on Kid Blog, one being about your quick science thing and the other one being about your science news for the week. So let's get on to the origin of species. Again, we're going to go through this really quickly. What you need to know, what we're going to talk about, micro and macro evolution. We're going to talk about what does it mean, like what does a species mean. And then we're going to talk about pre-zygotic and post-zygotic barriers that maintain reproductive isolation. And then last thing we're going to cover today is how allopatric and sympatric speciation are similar and different. So these first 4 bullet points are the things we're going to go over relatively quickly. So speciation, it sounds like species. They're talking about how did species originate? How did they start? So if you see here on the bottom, we've got 2 different types of birds. They're similar, They're similar, but they're 2 different species. Microevolution, just like it sounds, micro meaning small, they're changes within a single gene pool. So a certain gene, a certain allele for a specific change in a species is called micro. Macro is evolutionary change above the species level. So we're talking about over very, 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 very long periods of time, not in a small level. That's why they call it macro, for large. The concept species are a population, a group of populations whose members have the potential to interbreed and produce fertile offspring. So if I say these animals are of the same species or these are not from the same species, I'm essentially saying they have the potential to produce fertile, viable offspring. If they can't produce offspring, they're not from the same species. The term reproductive isolation means barriers to prevent members of 2 species from producing viable fertile hybrids. So think about this isolation meaning like a barrier or the thing that's getting in the way of having 2 of the same species reproduce. So in the beginning I told you we're going to talk about pre-zygotic and post-zygotic barriers. So zygotic sounds like zygote. So we're talking about barriers. What's stopping people from being able to reproduce? Not people, but organisms. Being able to reproduce, before they're a zygote and after they're a zygote. Prezygotic means what impedes fertilization. What's stopping members of the same species to be able to fertilize an egg? So it could be habitat isolation, it could be temporal, it could be behavioral, it could be mechanical, or it could be gametic. Gametes meaning like sperm and egg. Postzygotic means after the fact. So we're talking about preventing a hybrid zygote from developing into an adult. So reduced hybrid viability, reduced fertility, and a hybrid breakdown. So post-zygotic meaning what's stopping these offspring to become like an adult. So pre, before they become a zygote, and post, after zygotic. So of course some of you may be saying, what does that mean? So habitat isolation, talking about maybe animals of the same species are in 2 different habitats. So here we have like these snakes. Temporal isolation, so within the same place, but they're in, maybe they're in the same location, but there's something else that's isolating them. And then behavioral, these are the bluefoot. I don't say they're ducks, but if you look at the bluefoot, also just like behavior could be isolating them. Mechanical, I know this looks kind of weird, but these are 2 snails attempting to mate. And then gametic isolation, meaning the gametes are separated. So remember we're talking about sperm and eggs, and these are sea urchins. Postzygotic, we're talking about things that happen after the fact that is preventing animals to grow into viable, fertile offspring. So it could be the availability of a hybrid. So, we're not, essentially what's going on is that we're not getting, when I say hybrid, I'm talking about we're not getting the right mix or like diversity within I guess, a certain genes. So here we've got, I don't know if you guys have seen this before, like the short horses, the small horses. So if you don't have like a hybrid fertility, if you don't have a mix of genes like male and female, you could get essentially like mutations. And if you get these mutations, like the short horses, or here we got a small vegetation, they're not going to grow into viable fertile offspring. So one barrier after the fact, after fertilization, is to make sure there's like a hybrid viability, fertility, and breakdown. So other definitions of species, morphological, if you guys never heard of morph before, we're talking about body shape, size. Ecological, which we've talked about before, the niche and role in the community. And phylogenetic, meaning they share a common ancestry or branch of the tree of life. So species can be defined by morphologically, ecologically, and also phylogenetically. And the last thing we're going to talk about today is the two main modes of speciation. So say, for example, you start off with these gold or orange fish. Okay. Allopatric speciation, if you look at this picture right here, a new population forms a new species when they're geographically isolated. So one day, maybe this barrier in between gets really significant. So because these two become geographically isolated, now we have two completely different species. Sympatric means a subset of population forms a new species without geographic. So what if, this barrier was not impeding the way, like they still could mix, and all of a sudden we got this new population or this new subset of species. That's called sympatric. Sympatric meaning they're still together, but all of a sudden they got this new species. Allopatric meaning they were geographically separated. So allopatric, this part got cut off, but it means like, they were isolated. So it's caused by geological events or processes, involves natural selection or genetic drift. This is similar to the squirrels on the rims of the Grand Canyon. So when the Grand Canyon started to separate, we started to get two different species of squirrels. Sympatric meaning together and homeland, so overlapping populations in the same location. So this gene flow between subpopulations may be blocked by, and we're going to talk about this later, polyploidy, sexual selection, maybe habitat differentiation. So long story short, remember they're in the same location, just that they create new species. So here's a picture if you guys want to visualize it. As the Grand Canyon started to separate, or as it started to widen, the squirrels tended to look a little bit different, and they start to start new species. So they look kind of similar. You may notice that this part of the squirrel is lighter than the tail in this one, so they adapted to their environments a little bit differently. And that's actually everything that we're going to talk about today. Hope you enjoyed our short lesson. For the rest of the class, you're going to answer the questions, and maybe you can get started on your homework for the rest of the weekend. So take care, miss you guys, and I'll see you guys on Tuesday.